for those of you who don't know Katie, she is the owner and nurse educator at Fresh RN. Katie, we have known each other for many years now, going back to when Nurse Grid was just a start and when you were beginning sort of your entrepreneur career. But I'd like to just turn it over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about Fresh RN and what you're doing with your business over there?
Yeah, so I have a website called freshrn.com, and we've got podcasts, courses, I've got some books, and the whole platform is really to help nurses transition to practice, or, mainly from nursing school. But if you're someone who's were a nurse and went out of the field for a while and are coming back, my goal is to really support people through that transition, because it is very difficult to go from nursing school to acute care nursing. It is like the massive reality shock that I'd never anticipated. So I wanted to provide support to people going through that. So yeah, you can check out freshrn.com. I got links to everything right there.
Yeah, when we first started talking those many years ago, that was always something that stuck out to me, was those first few years of being a nurse and how challenging they can be. And you've certainly found a lot of influence in that particular moment in the nursing career. And, that's also what the Keener app was developed to help with. In particular, a lot of those nurses who are sort of finding their own and finding their own voice and their own ways of dealing with and managing being a nurse. We all know, probably most of the people who are watching today are nurses, are caregivers themselves. Extremely challenging, and it's a stressful job. The Keener app is a free app, free resource that can really help those nurses in those first few years and even beyond. They're adding content constantly to this app from folks like you, but other industry professionals who have a ton of insight into how to deal with that transition to nursing, but also with all that comes with nursing that goes beyond just the bedside care that we provide. So I'm excited to talk with you today because we've got a lot of things to dive into. What we learned in nursing school, what we wish we learned in nursing school. But, you mentioned those first few years coming out of school and trying to find your own. Can you speak to more about, from your experience and all the nurses you've spoken to, what that sort of entry into the market is like? And what nurses are going through, either for the nurses who are students right now, the student nurses who are watching, or those nurses who are just now beginning their career on the field. Can you talk more about that transition?
Yeah, so I've been a nurse now for 11 years, and I notice now, or have continued to notice, that the experience that I had those many years ago is very, it's continuing, that people have this massive reality shock when you go from school to that first year. And it's not like, I think I have this perspective, and I do notice this continually, is that it's like we have this mentality that if we just work really hard and we really have this great work ethic, this diligence, this devotion to being a good nurse, that if we put in that work, it's just going to happen. And we do, and like in nursing school, if I got the good grades, I passed the NCLEX in 75 questions, I'm going to be ready to hit the ground running. And it's like, no, I felt like nursing school, when I was in it, because it was so incredibly difficult, I thought that I got to the top of the mountain at the end of nursing school, when really I was only halfway up. Yeah. And I had to, and that first year at the bedside, because it took that long to really feel like clocking in with confidence. I know what I'm doing. I don't need to constantly ask people for help. I'm way off of orientation. And it continues. I think I've noticed that mentality has continued. And it wasn't just unique to me, having massive reality shock, but a lot of people experience that. So that's been an interesting thing to continue to observe. And my hope is, through things like this and through my platform, is to help manage expectations for nursing school as you transition into practice. Because if you cannot have that massive, oh my gosh, I'm not what I thought I was going to be, imposter syndrome, and you're working against your own mentality and these crashing expectations, that it can be a game changer in how you navigate mentally and emotionally becoming like this wonderful nurse.
I think that's the point, Dean. It's that expectation component, right? Like it's not this sort of, you know, A, B sort of transition. Like transitioning into your career is a process. And I think expecting to come straight out of nursing school and feel like you've got it, whether that's some expectations that some people have or not, it's not like that. I think your entire career is this gradual build of becoming a better and better nurse. And it starts, in nursing school. I mean, lots of times people go into are already caregivers before nursing school. So you could say it starts even before then. But nursing school is sort of about building that foundation, and then transitioning into the work is when you really start to find out who you are as a nurse, and what type of nurse are you going to be. Because when you're in school, you've got that sort of, that safety net underneath you where you have either someone who's kind of watching you or working with you all the time. And then once you get to working as the primary caregiver yourself, you're off and you're on your own. And that's a tough transition, but it's just important, I think, for people to realize that it's part of the process and it's part of what you build from. I remember when my transition, I graduated in 2009, right when the Great Recession happened, and there was no jobs anywhere. I took a skilled nursing facility job, and which was not what I expected to do, but I jumped into that. And I remember I was popping meds for my first. Let me get my background back going. There. I was popping meds for my first patient with my preceptor next to me. This is my first shift on. And so I went in there and she's like, this is kind of where you write down your initials saying you sign for the meds and you give the meds and you double check and you check the patient. And I did it for the second one. And then she goes, I think you got it. And she walked off and that was it. And then I had the rest of the 20 patients to give meds for and pass and start to do treatments for. So that was a harsh transition, of course, but I also feel like working in a skilled nursing facility was an amazing sort of way for me to blend myself into the career. Did you have any experiences like that? What did you do what was your first job that you got out of nursing school?
So my first job, okay, so I look back and I'm like, I thought I was really well prepared and did all these great things, but I made like all these mistakes. So one of the first ones was I thought I had never had a clinical in a NICU, but for some reason decided I thought I wanted to be a NICU nurse, like neonatal. So I applied for a residency program and said I wanted to do that and had no experience in it. They had no reason to hire me into that. So I got this job on a cardiothoracic surgical, like post cardiac surgery, floor. Although it was kind of a step downy situation because they did take some pretty sick patients. So that was my very first job. I never thought that I thought that I was going to do some specialty or something because I was a hard worker.
Right.
Yeah, no, that didn't happen.
Me too.
And then, but that job was wonderful for me. I had a wonderful preceptor and wonderful experience, but I do remember the first time I had to page a physician. I had never paged a physician in nursing school. Did you?
No, but I'm getting anxiety just thinking about it right now.
Well, and before I tell, like, I thought that everybody had, and I was just this person who had this, like, lapse in experience. Like, everybody else must have done this. And then I did a Twitter poll once that was like, hey, nurses, when you were in nursing school, did you ever page a physician? I got like 800 responses. And it was like 99% of people had never paged a physician in nursing school. So it made me feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
Even though I think that we should be paging physicians in nursing school, but anyways, we had to clarify about some basic order, like colace, or I don't know, something that really was not a big deal, but I needed to call the physician. So I didn't know how paging worked. Like, I know we do a lot of text pages now, but like putting in the phone number, the beep happens, right? And then you put in your own phone number. That was totally new to me. I put in the phone. Okay, so here's his pager number. I'm like, okay. So I put in the pager number. It starts to beep, and I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Did you just hang up?
I just hung up. And then she goes, okay, so you've never done this before.
Yeah, that became clear. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never done this. So she was like, okay, you need to put in our number. And I was like, oh, okay. So I do. And then it beeps. And I'm like, I don't know our number. This is day 3. Don't know our number. So she quickly told it to me. I mistyped it. It's fine. I did get it on the 3rd try. He was not very happy with me.
Was it night shift? Were you working night
no,
shift?
it was days. Yeah, I was on a little days section before I started night, so that was fun.
We're getting there's people who are writing in are saying they did the same exact thing, and I think this gets overlooked a lot in nursing school. You focus so much on the clinical aspect of things, right? Like the science, the anatomy of the body, the skills, things like that.
Yes.
And then you get in and you realize, how do I put someone on hold? How do I answer the phone?
I know how to transfer a phone call.
What's low census? I didn't even know what low census was when I got out of nursing school. And I almost feel embarrassed to say that out loud, because I'm sure there's a lot of nursing students who are like, you know what low census was? But there are so many terms and technology and things that when you arrive, it's sort of like when you float to a new floor. Yeah. You're like, everything's different here. I have to learn where things are and provide good care. And as a new nurse, you're so focused and worried about, I don't want to make a mistake. I want to make sure my patient's healthy and safe. But and then you're trying to also figure out how to manage X amount of patients at one time. Okay, good. Someone else didn't know what census was when they graduated. Okay. But
throughput was the one I did not understand.
Right. Throughput's one too.
What is that word?
I'll go to the freezer right now, and my wife will tell me to find a bag of something, and I just stare, and I can't find it anywhere. And the med room was this anxiety thing for me, or the supply room, where I was like, okay, where are whatever the flushes? Mm-hmm. I need to find the flushes, and you're in such a hurry, and all of those things start to compound. And as a new nurse, when you're still learning how to be a caregiver and provide safe and effective patient care, just learning how to answer the phone, page someone, find something in the med room can be really challenging. What sort of tips would you give to someone who's coming out of nursing school, knowing that you can't really train that stuff? You can only prepare to have to learn on the fly.
That's a great question. So my thing, and I go over this in my courses at the beginning of all of them because they're geared towards newer nurses and people who are just starting out. I think that the way to maintain a good morale when you have to learn so many little things like that is to manage your expectations and really count your tiny wins. What I like to tell people, okay, you know what? If you figured out how to not drop a call, darn it, that's a win. I know we have this mentality, when people, learn these very basic things, oh, great, I should have already known that. And then anytime you do something well, you're kind of knocking yourself down. But if you can kind of flip that and be like, hey, I found out where the ABD pads were, and someone asked for them, and I walked directly to where the ABD pads are, and I got some tape just in case, and they needed the tape too. Write those little baby wins down. And celebrate. You don't need to go make a Facebook status or a
let me selfie this real quick. Yeah.
But write it down, and then in a few weeks, look at your tiny wins then compared to now, and that stuff really compounds. And I want people to focus not on, did I do perfect this shift? Did I get everything right? Because you're not. You're not going to do that. So if that's your measuring tape of or measuring stick of minimum expectations of, did I do everything perfect or not, pass fail, kind of like school can be, you're going to have this terrible morale. So I encourage people to focus on improvement with every single shift, even if it's a 1% improvement. There's compound interest that occurs when you do that, even if it's 1%, as opposed to, okay, I didn't do everything perfectly, so I'm a failure and I'm never going to get this. Patients need their nurses to have a good morale, a good mentality, and be in a good mindset, as opposed to this constantly knocking yourself down.
I love that, and clearly people are agreeing who are writing in as well. What you said about sort of celebrating those small wins, or at least acknowledging them to yourselves, is important. I remember I was probably 4 years into my bedside career when I still felt I still viewed myself as a new grad nurse or as a new nurse, right?
Yeah.
In the eyes of other people that I was projecting myself into. Um, and then I remember looking around at one point and realizing I'm actually a more senior nurse here right now, because sometimes floors get packed with a lot of younger nurses, and that could be actually a great thing. But for me, it took me a second to realize people kept coming to me with questions, and I was like, I actually know the answers to all these questions. Much different than nursing school, but that was because I had that 4 years of experience, of those wins, of those micro learning moments that were building and building and building. And it just took, all of a sudden, it just snapped and it hit, and I was like, I can do this. I'm actually experienced. I'm seasoned, and I know a lot more than maybe I do. And I think nurses probably don't realize, student nurses probably don't realize when they're coming into the market, how much into the profession, how much they actually already know. Like, schools can do a great job of educating you. You can rely sometimes on those instincts and not second guess yourself too much. And just know that every shift you're building on top of that, and you're growing and maturing as a nurse. And before you know it, you're going to be a senior nurse on the floor.
Yeah, I think, one of the things too is when you enter the profession and it's your first job, you can have that low morale and like, I don't have anything to offer because so many people, there's so much I don't know and I have so much to learn. But hold up, you got a nursing license, and if you are someone who's coachable, teachable, accountable, reliable, you are an asset. You bring something to the table. They can teach you the skills. They have the budget to do that. Like, they need people who have that unencumbered nursing license, who are going to be willing to, work hard, show up on time, be honest with what they don't know, and have a commitment to doing a good job. So that's also one of my things I talk about, is like, you bring something to the table. I know you feel like I don't know anything, but even like, we can fill those gaps in, but I can't teach somebody how to show up on time. I can't teach somebody how to actually be coachable when I tell you, hey, that's actually not how we hang IV fluids. We got to do it this way, and not get defensive, but rather, oh, okay, tell me more. Like, that's that stuff that you can bring to the table that's highly valuable. So I think it's important, like, because while we do see people come in that are a little cocky and a little too confident, most of the time people come in so intimidated and like they're like morale's up on the floor. They feel like they know nothing. Like, oh, please teach me because I don't know anything. It's like, no, you do know things. Yeah. You absolutely do. And I think it's important that people remember that as they start out in their job.
And I think that insecurity can show up in different ways for different people. They have different ways of maybe showing that insecurity coming out of nursing school. We talk so much about how important the nursing community is, and for the senior nurses, the more senior nurses who are watching right now, and the ones that are on our floor, how important they are for the development of younger nurses. And we've all been there. We all know what it feels like. But talking about things that maybe I wish I would have been taught in nursing school is, how can I present myself or how can I receive feedback and make myself open to feedback in a way that will be best received by the more senior nurses, because that is something that happens in nursing school, right? You're a student, you're in a constantly learning environment, and then you transition to the floor where you're having to learn and do by yourself at the same time. What sort of tips and suggestions would you have for someone who is a newer nurse to be a better receiver of information from the more senior nurses?
That's a great question, because it is a challenge that so many people have. Because when you start out, there's this power gradient, I really want to impress people, and I want you to think I'm competent. So what ends up happening is people aren't super honest about the things that they don't know, and they kind of fake it till they make it. And that's dangerous. Don't be doing that. Like, speaking as someone who's precepted, it's like, I just want someone to be honest with me about what they don't know, what doesn't make sense. But when someone is giving you feedback, as a new nurse, you're going to get a lot, because you're not going to do a lot of things right. And you're going to need to be coached and So my biggest tip is to keep it objective. This is not a personal thing. It's not a personal attack on, oh my God, I can't believe you didn't know that. No, it's what's more important is you doing it right, not being right. So let's make it objective. It's just, this is what the policy says. We got to do it. And we're going to do it this way. Hey, I noticed that, you're not doing blank. I don't know. There's a specific way you really should frame feedback if you're giving feedback, but when you're receiving it, definitely making sure that you a lot of us may react and have this oh my God, I feel terrible, or I'm mad at this person for telling me I didn't do this right. Pull back from that reaction, take a deep breath. And choose your response instead of a knee-jerk reaction, and make it objective and listen to what they're saying. And a lot of times preceptors say things in a great way, but sometimes it's in an ugly package, but it might still be the truth. Yeah. So it's important to kind of think about what they're saying, like content-wise. Is this genuinely something that I need to change? And most of the time it is, as a new nurse, because we just get corrected so much. And I remember that being hard on my morale. I just wanted to get through a shift where I wasn't constantly corrected. So it's back to those tiny wins when you do get things right. And I do like to compare this, though, because I played basketball in college, and I've played basketball for a very long time. And when I learned how to become a nurse, it kind of reminded me of that learning curve with basketball. I had this unrealistic expectation coming into nursing that I was just going to be like LeBron James right away, because I was going to do all the work, and I was going to go in the gym early, and I was going to do blah, blah, blah. But that's not realistic. Nursing school is kind of like learning about basketball in a classroom for 4 years and only getting to shoot around a little bit and maybe scrimmage with a couple people. And then nursing, being on an acute care hospital, is like hopping in a college game. Like, there's just so much you have to learn. So I want you to think about your preceptor, like when you're learning those skills like IV starts and drop and dob Hoff tubes and time management, all that kind of stuff. It's almost like you've got your coach who's correcting your form, who's saying, hey, get down on defense. Hey, do this and do that. And it's not personal. I'm trying to develop you into the best player, the best nurse that you can be. And I think that if you can reframe it like that, and not like oh, I should know this and I'm getting corrected and this means they don't think I'm good. Like, we expect all the new nurses to really not know what they're doing, and it's not abnormal for there to be a ton of instruction and a ton of correction and a ton of feedback.
And it's almost comforting as a preceptor to see that acknowledgement in a new nurse, that they acknowledge that they don't know everything and they're hungry to learn and want to learn from you and others. Like, that gives me comfort knowing that, okay, this person's in the right mindset, right? Instead of working with someone who's trying to hide that, that makes me concerned that are they going to hide something else? So I think that's such a great point. And there's so many tidbits in there about how to be a good preceptor and how to be a good preceptee. I think nursing school starts to get into some of that, right? By being a nursing student in clinicals and stuff, you get a taste of that. What sort of tips, what sort of things in nursing school did you learn that now, how many years have you been a nurse now?
11.
So now 11 years into your career, that you still look back on and remember as something that you learned in school that you utilize today or have utilized throughout your career.
So there's one big one that sticks out in my mind. I kind of observed in clinical, like, okay, we do what the doctors need, we do what the patients need, go, run around. And then I had a few instances where patients were not cool, a little disrespectful. And one time I had a patient, and I was with the preceptor, it was a nursing school, so the clinical instructor, I was like with her. This patient had like a TBI, a mild TBI, broken hip from, I can't remember if it was like a motorcycle accident or something like that. And he all of a sudden screams at her, like, I can't remember what it was. It was about pain, it was about something. And she immediately was like, whoa, I am your nurse. You will not yell at me. You will not curse at me. I'm here to take care of you and help you do the things that you cannot do for yourself. And I just was like, whoa. Like, it was just, that was one sentence. And it just blew my mind, because it was like, and as I reflect back, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I was like, I thought people could just say whatever they wanted to us. I thought I had to just take it because customer service or something. But she just assertively stood up for herself. This guy, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It was like he just flew out of his brain for a minute, and then he realized, and he was mortified. Of course, he was super kind to the rest of the shift because he felt so bad.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I saw a nurse really assertively stand up for themselves in one of those situations. And of course, since then, I had a million situations like that, because that's what working with the public is sometimes you're going to have people who are going to try to run all over you. And part of learning how to be a good nurse is developing assertiveness. And that was just one of the first like displays of that I had ever seen. And it was very impactful for me that I was like, darn right, you can't talk to me like that. So like I carry that with me because I'm very well aware of where's the line of, all right, hold up. Whoa, don't talk to me like that. Let's figure out something, but we're going to be mutually respectful here.
Well, and that was you recognizing that, that there is a line, right? And nurses need to hold that line. And there has been, it feels like a trend where that line gets pushed further and further back, right? You can feel that, and you can feel it on the floors that you work. But it's up to us. We don't need policies or emails to tell us where we can draw that line. And it's super important that no matter how young you are or new you are as a nurse, that you deserve the respect that you give, and that should be received as well. So that's super critical. I worked with behavioral health patients for the majority of my bedside career, and so that was just constant. And I think there's honestly there's a difference between the way men and women are treated as caregivers and stuff. And so it was different for me, and it took me just experiencing a lot of that to learn how best to deal with it. But everyone's got to find that voice, and has got to find that line. But we cannot tolerate that sort of abuse and talk. And it's so good that you got to see that in school. And I hope that schools are doing a good job of sort of like highlighting, like it's not all pretty, right? There's a lot of challenges that come with the job.
One of the things that like I've noticed too is like because people think I'm, like you said, doesn't matter how new you are, like you should be treated with respect. And I think that there's people kind of differentiate, like there's a difference between like commanding respect and because we're humans. Like just because you've been a surgeon for 30 years and I've been a nurse for 5 minutes does not mean you can disrespect me. There should be this common level of human to human respect that we provide everybody. Now there's a difference between that and commanding authority, which you can earn after a longer period of time on a unit in an area. Those are very different things. You don't just get to disrespect me just because I'm new. No, that's not a thing. But as I move up that ladder, there's senior nurses and I earn more authority. That's a different thing. So I think it's important that people delineate those things. Like just because you're new does not give anyone the right to treat you disrespectfully.
Absolutely. And I, think about my experience coming out of nursing school, and, what you said about being classes and scores and tests and stuff really resonated with me, because I can remember just overthinking things so much, and almost like I was trying to answer questions like they were a multiple choice. And I was like NCLEXing my brain, like way overthinking, like what does the board want me to say right here? But when you stop and you think back to things that you've seen in your career in school as a student, what you learn, what you know about the body, it really helps you kind of slow down and process things. And for me, it helped me stop, prevented me from overthinking things and assessing the situation that was in front of me, rather than, like I just said, overthinking and trying to complicate things more than they should be.
Right.
Well, Katie, we have been on for a half hour. You and I probably could talk for hours, and maybe we'll have to find another time to expand upon this some more. You're such an amazing resource for students and new nurses coming into the market. I'm a more experienced nurse, self-actualization right now. Like technically, I guess.
Because you entered it in 2009, right?
Yeah. So it has been.
You got me.
Double digits now. Yeah. I follow you and read so much of what you write and find you incredibly helpful, even with more experience. But I know for a fact that new nurses need to check you out, check out Fresh RN. And your courses are amazing and so deep and rich. So everyone should give those a check out. And people should also take a look at the Keener mobile app, which is free wherever you get your wherever you download your mobile apps. Tons of really amazing content in there, and a lot of self-help content to help you transition into the career of nursing and take what you've learned in nursing school or what you didn't learn in nursing school and what you weren't prepared for, and help you deal with those first few years, which are so important and foundational for where you go in your career. Katie, thank you so much for taking some time, and let's chat again.
Sounds great. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye.